Zero trust is, at the same time, the most oversold phrase in cybersecurity, and one of the most useful ideas in it. Both of those are true, and the gap between them is where a lot of vendors make their money. If you work in IT, you already know the feeling. Every firewall renewal, every sales pitch, every booth at every conference has zero trust printed on it somewhere. So it's reasonable to assume the whole thing is marketing. It isn't. Underneath the noise is a genuinely good architectural argument. And here's the part nobody leads with. It's built almost entirely out of things you already administer. Let's make this simple. You know the old rule: build a strong perimeter, firewall at the edge, VPN for the remote users, and an unspoken assumption that anything inside the network has already earned its trust. Castle and moat. That model made sense when the castle actually held everything. It doesn't anymore. Your company's data lives in SaaS platforms you don't host, on cloud infrastructure you don't rack, behind APIs you don't own, accessed by laptops sitting in coffee shops and spare bedrooms. The perimeter didn't get breached so much as it got irrelevant. There's no longer a meaningful inside. Zero trust is the architectural answer to that. It is not a rebrand. It's a response to a real structural change in where work actually happens. Zero trust is a strategic framework built on one principle: never trust, always verify. Trust is never granted just because of where you're connecting from, not because you're on the corporate LAN, not because you came in through the VPN, not because your IP is in the right subnet. Every access request from a user, a device, an application, or a server gets authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before it goes anywhere. You treat every single access attempt as if it came from a hostile public network, because functionally it might have. Now, here's the part that matters for you specifically. Zero trust is a strategy, not a product. Nobody sells zero trust in a box. What vendors sell you are components that can serve a zero trust architecture. The architecture itself is a set of decisions somebody has to make. And making those decisions well requires knowing how the environment actually works, which is more or less your entire job description. The term was coined in 2010 by John Kindervag, then a principal analyst at Forrester Research. The report was called, and this is real, No More Chewy Centers, Introducing the Zero Trust Model of Information Security. The title comes from an old InfoSec joke. We built our networks like an M&M hard, crunchy shell, soft, chewy center. Kindervag's argument after he'd studied a whole pile of breaches was blunt. Trust itself is the vulnerability, not weak trust, not misconfigured trust. The concept of a trusted network zone is the flaw, because an attacker who gets inside inherits all of it for free. And notice where that came from, not a university lab. An analyst reading breach reports, noticing the same failure pattern over and over. That's threat modeling. Keep that in mind. It's the exact same reasoning we come back to at the end. Forrester named it. NIST wrote the blueprint. The official reference architecture is NIST Special Publication 800-207 from August 2020. And NIST's actual model is smaller than the marketing makes it sound. There are two functional pieces. First, the policy decision point, the PDP. This is the brain. It lives up on the control plane and it splits into two subcomponents. The policy engine makes the actual allow or deny call. It weighs identity, device health, location, threat intelligence against policy. The policy administrator executes that decision. It generates the session token or the credential, and it tells the enforcement layer to open the path. Then separately, down on the data plane, the policy enforcement point, the PEP. This is the bouncer. It sits right in front of the resource, and it enables, monitors, or kills the connection based on what the brain told it. Here's a detail worth getting right because it comes up in interviews. The policy engine and the policy administrator are not siblings of the enforcement point. They are the two halves of the PDP. A lot of blog posts flatten this into three equal components. NIST doesn't. Separating the deciding from the enforcing, that's the entire architectural point. Now let's translate that into things you've touched. In a Microsoft shop, Entra ID, specifically conditional access, plays both the policy engine and the policy administrator. It reads the risk signals. It issues the token. On-prem Active Directory does a version of this too, just without the dynamic, real-time context that a modern cloud identity provider brings. And the enforcement point, that can be a next-gen firewall, an identity-aware proxy like Cloudflare Access, an API gateway, or the isolation agent already running on your endpoints. You have configured every one of these things. You just didn't have the formal names for the roles they were playing. And if you want to go deeper, NIST finalized SP 1800-35 in 2025. That's the implementation guide with real reference builds. And CISA's Zero Trust Maturity Model organizes the whole thing into 5 pillars. Both are free. Links are in the description. Because the term got absorbed by marketing departments, the misconceptions pile up fast. Clearing them up is genuinely useful, and honestly, it's a quick way to sound like you know what you're talking about. Myth 1. It's a product you can buy. No, ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, is one product category and it covers mostly remote access. It's a slice. Nobody sells the whole thing. Myth 2. It's a project with an end date. No, it's a continuous program. There's no ticket you close. Environments change, so the verification has to keep changing with them. Myth 3. It's just least privilege rebranded. Least privilege governs what you can reach. Zero Trust adds how and under what conditions. Device health, location, behavior. Least privilege is a component, not the framework. Myth 4, it's just MFA everywhere. MFA is foundational and nowhere near sufficient. Zero Trust checks context across the entire session, not once at login. A stolen session token does not care that you passed MFA an hour ago. Myth 5, it makes users miserable. Done properly, it usually makes their life better. Seamless single sign-on, backed by background telemetry, beats a clunky VPN client and endless re-auth prompts. Friction is the failure mode, not the goal. And myth 6, it means we don't trust our employees. No, it means we don't implicitly trust connections and devices. We assume credentials get stolen and endpoints get compromised, because constantly they do. Let me show you the difference with one scenario. Company we'll call Global Corp. Sarah's a financial analyst working remotely from a coffee shop. She needs the internal billing app to pull a quarterly report. While she's there, she clicks a really well-built phishing link. An attacker drops a payload on her laptop and harvests her credentials and her active session tokens. Nothing exotic about this. It's the most common opening move there is. Now, watch the same attack hit two different architectures. Scenario A, the traditional perimeter, firewall, and a traditional VPN. Once you are connected, remote users land on a broad internal VLAN with routing to the internal servers. The attacker logs into the VPN with Sarah's stolen credentials. And because the VPN grants network-level access, castle, and moat, the attacker is now inside the trusted zone. They scan, they map the infrastructure, they find the billing server, exploit a known unpatched vulnerability, and walk out with the customer database. Verdict: total breach. One phished analyst, one compromised database. And the perimeter worked exactly as designed. That's the problem. Scenario B, same attacker, same stolen credentials, but Global Corp went zero trust, no broad VPN. Access to the billing app runs through an identity-aware proxy. The network is microsegmented, and policy demands continuous evaluation of identity, device health, and context. Now three independent things have to fail before anything bad happens. Defense 1, context. The attacker logs in from their own machine. The identity provider sees an unrecognized device, an impossible geolocation, and blocks it, or demands phishing-resistant MFA. So they try to hijack Sarah's live session on her actual laptop instead. But endpoint management spots the payload, marks the device unhealthy, and policy automatically revokes that laptop's access to everything. Session terminated mid-flight. And even if, somehow, both of those failed, Sarah's laptop is authorized to talk to exactly one thing: the billing web interface on port 443. No scanning the network, no pinging the domain controller, no path to the database. Verdict contained. Blast radius, one laptop. Data lost, none. And the difference wasn't better technology. It's that Scenario B assumed the breach would happen and designed for the aftermath. That's the whole shift. And this is the part I really want the IT crowd to hear. You are not starting from zero on zero trust. Look at what's probably already in your ticket queue. Least privilege every time you set NTFS permissions so marketing can't reach the HR folders. That's it. Building block, segmentation, guest Wi-Fi of the corporate LAN, VoIP on its own VLAN. Basic, but it's the same reasoning microsegmentation, just formalize. Identity, rolling out MFA, cleaning up stale AD accounts, standing up single sign-on. Those are the highest leverage zero trust moves there are, and you're already making them. Device management, patches, EDR, disk encryption before a laptop touches corporate email. That's device health as an access signal. That is a zero trust policy whether or not anyone called it one. So the gap between where you are and a zero trust architecture is not a knowledge gap about tools. It's a gap in framing. You've been doing these things to keep the environment clean. Zero trust does the same things as deliberate connected controls that answer a specific threat model. Same actions, different reasoning. The reasoning is the job. So how do you actually start? Not with a purchase order, with a decision process, the same one that runs through every defensive discipline. We call it the threat and control method, and zero trust maps onto it so cleanly it's almost a worked example. Inventory. You cannot protect what you cannot see. Users, devices, applications, data flows. What exists, what's critical, what already protects it. This is unglamorous, and it's where most zero trust programs quietly die. It's also where your operational knowledge is worth the most. You already know the one server nobody documented that everything depends on. Threads, assume breach, then follow it. If this credential is stolen tomorrow, what does the attacker inherit? If the app server doesn't need to reach the printing via LAN, that open path is a gift you are handing an attacker for free. Controls, now and only now, you choose. Identity first, best return per hour. Microsegmentation next. Logging and monitoring throughout, so a login in Florida and a database query from Europe 10 minutes later is a detection, not a post-incident surprise. Scale, apply that same reasoning to the next app, the next cloud account, the next environment nobody told you about. That's the actual deliverable, not a firewall config, a repeatable way of thinking. And notice what that is. That's not a zero trust process. That's how a blue team defender thinks about any problem. Zero trust is just one place where the reasoning got written down. Learn the reasoning. And zero trust stops being another framework to memorize. Zero trust moves you from securing the plumbing of the network to securing the transactions themselves. From where is this coming from? To what is this, who's asking, on what device, and should it be allowed right now? For an IT professional, that shift is smaller than it looks. You already own the identity systems, the endpoint posture, the segmentation, the logs. Zero trust is just the argument for connecting them on purpose instead of by accident. The full written breakdown with every NIST and CISA source linked is on the blog. If you want the decision process itself, the one that works across every defensive domain, that's what we teach. And if you're not there yet, Keep It Safe. Practical defensive security in your inbox. Both links are in the description. Start with identity and asset visibility. Build outward from your most critical data and don't buy anything until you've finished step 1, because cybersecurity is not rocket science.